So, welcome to another deck profile video. Today's video is going to be in regards to Sakuyamon. I've had a good amount of fun playing this deck. It really makes you think, and the deck as a whole is just very good. And I think it sometimes gets underestimated. I recently made some tweaks. I played it in a tournament, came second with a bit of luck, however. I did play against Leopardmon, which you see in the previous video. And I also went up against Blue Flare in the final and lost, sadly, to Blue Flare. But that is a supremely strong deck anyway. And I was able to get a Game 2 win out of the 3 games we played anyway, so I was quite happy with that. But getting straight into this, so starting with 4 eggs in total. We run 4 Cemons. I think this egg is just mandatory for this deck. I really can't think of any other eggs that you might want to play. But ideally, I mean, for me, this works out wonderfully because you use an option cards of a cost of 2 or more anyway. And this lets you draw 1 card when you do. So it's just a good starting point. Moving on to the level 3s. Start with Cemon. Now this card stops your opponent from reducing Digivolution costs. So it's a good blocker in regards to training cards, as well as any Digimon effects that would stop the reduction of a Digivolution, such as maybe the Promo Vmon from the new promotional cards that were released, where it can reduce 1 cost to any Digimon with a free trait, basically. The next one, we run a one-off for Pillowmon. This one, players can't play Digimon by effects. That includes both yourself and the opponent. There's not often times where you're playing Digimon by effects in this deck, so it's a good blocker when you're going up against things like Leopardmon or potentially D-Brigade. So just a one-off of each is fine, otherwise you can potentially change it to 2 of one version or 2 of the other. Next up, we start with one of our mandatory searchers. It's a mandatory 4-off, it's Renamon from BT10. On play, you reveal 4 cards. You can add any yellow tamer that you find, but just obviously a one-off, and you get to add a option card with plugin in its name. So you could potentially select 2 targets. Now, depending on what you have in your hand, it can be a turn 1 play. Normally is for me. However, it may be different depending on what it is that you have in your hand. Now, the same can be said for the next searcher of this deck, which is EX2 Renamon. Now, this one does exactly the same. You've revealed the top 4 cards, except instead of an option card, you'll select either essentially the champion, ultimate, or mega level of the Sakuyamon lineup, and then you can also select out a Rika among them. Now you'll soon see what Tamers we play in this deck anyway, but ultimately these 2 cards are mandatory for this deck because of the search power that you get and the ability to, obtain the pieces that you need nice and early in order to then progress later on in the game. The last 2 rookies I play is another Renamon. This one's from EX4. Not often will you need to play this one. I don't think so anyway, but I do like the inherited ability. This Renamon at the bottom here is minus 2000 DP inherited. This one here gains you a memory, and this one does exactly the same. It gains you a memory. That's whenever you use an option card of a cost of 2 or more, and you'll see that this is an ongoing thing as we go up through the levels. But this particular lineup has worked for me so far. But I really wouldn't change anything right now. But I would imagine tweaks will be made as we go throughout the next sets. But sadly, I think the only extra support this deck is getting over the next couple of sets is a promo card in the form of Sakuyamon Maid Mode, which is an ace card, weirdly. So yeah, I can't see this deck getting any stronger going forward, but we'll soon see. But this is the rookies I run. Next on, we have champions. We only run 10 of. So let's get started with the one-offs. Starting with Cemon, just a hybrid for game. Digivolves on top of a yellow tamer for a cost of 2, and you can swing for game if you've got the memory. Next one is a BT10 Cubimon. It's got 2 effects, of which you can only activate 1 during its when Digivolving phase. You can either return 1 plug-in option card from your trash back to hand, or you can trash a plug-in card from your hand and draw 2 cards. It's a good one-off to have in some cases. It has come up, and it does work very well sometimes, but just a one-off is decent enough, because the next 8 cards I'm about to show you are mandatory for this deck. 4 of Cubimon from EX2. Now, when Digivolving, you reveal the top 3 cards instead, and you get to choose out a plug-in option card among them and place it into your hand. This is just a very good card in general, especially if you're, bricking for those option cards. But at the same time, it has the same minus 2000 DP reduction inherited. Again, if you activate an option card with a cost of 2 or more. The same applies for the next searcher. Sorry, not searcher. The next Cubimon or Yalcomon, however you want to call it. This one's from EX4. On play or when Digivolving, I can give one of my Digimon blocker until the end of the opponent's turn. It's inherited is exactly the same as this one here. Again, it's minus 2000 DP reduction. You'll probably find that you'll be building into this maybe in the back, in the breeding area, more so than this one, because you want to be using the search power for this. However, there are times where you have to go defensive, and you can either hard play this for a cost of 4, or you could Digivolve for a cost of 2, or potentially 3, depending on your situation, and just making sure you have a blocker in play. So this is the 10 cards I run. Alternatively, you could take this out and run 2 hybrids, but I find having this one of it has come up and it has helped in some certain situations. Next up, we'll go to the ultimates. We only run 8 in total. To start with, we'll run 4 Tamers. We all know what this does, but it's from EX2. When Digivolving, you get to play out a Rika Tamer. And again, it's inherited as a minus 2000 DP reduction. Only if you use an option card with a cost of 2 or more. The next 4 is Dalmon, or Talmon, however you want to say it. But this one has an on-play and when Digivolving effect, and it bounces a 6000 DP or less Digimon back to your own, back to the opponent's hand. It's inherited again, is exactly the same as this. It's a minus DP effect. You'll want to be playing Talmon ideally in turn 2 or 3, depending on your memory situation, to get that Rika out in play for free. Otherwise, if you're going on a more defensive approach, you'll be using this often, I imagine, especially with the effect bouncing 6000 DP or less, which is really good. So yeah, I mean, it really will depend on what your situation is, but the earlier you get the Rika in play, the faster this deck does manage. But ideally, yeah, it really does just depend on your situation in general. Next up, we have our level 6s. Now, we'll start with a 2 of Sakuyamon from EX2. When you Digivolve, you get to unsuspend, and then you can return a plug-in card from your trash for each tamer that you have in play. So it's a really good card, especially if you want to be a little bit more aggressive. However, this deck doesn't like that. You have to remember she's only 11,000 DP, and in this particular deck you don't get any DP boosts. So, well, it depends on what option cards you want to run, but I don't run any of the particular plug-in cards that give the additional boost. But you can be aggressive depending on the option card you use. Additionally, your turn effect is not once per turn, and every time you use an option card, she minuses 3000 DP to one of your opponent's Digimon. So she's just a very good card in general. But I only run 2 of her, and you'll understand why shortly. Next up, we run 2 Kazuhamons, basically the evil version of Sakuyamon, depending on your experience in terms of the Digimon shows. Let's put the pretty one out front, there we go. When Digivolving, you get to play an option card of a cost of 5 or less, no colour requirement included, so it could be any option card. And then when you do, your turn effect, which is once per turn, will trigger, and you can then play out either a Talmon or a blue or yellow level 4 or lower Digimon from its stack. So in some cases you will line that up with Dalmon or Yukalmon, depending on your situation. And then the last 2 level 6s is that of Sakuyamon Maid Mode, which is just a very good card in general. She can Digivolve over a level 5 for a cost of 3 or a level 6 for a cost of 2. So there are situations where you could potentially have Sakuyamon out in play. You'll Digivolve into Sakuyamon Maid Mode for a cost of 2. You could swing, trigger the when attacking effect, which will then let you Digivolve back into a Sakuyamon for a cost of 1. And you can just keep stacking them up. It can be rather hilarious. But ideally what you want to be doing is when you Digivolve, you'll play the option card, which you then stack on top of your security afterwards as part of her effect. All the DP minus reductions will then take place. And then you ideally want to be swinging, so then you can unsuspend with the Digivolution for Sakuyamon, but it's completely up to you. But she can Digivolve on top of either of those 2, but just for a cost of 2. So in some cases you might even have that, this, then that in a lineup. But these 6, that's all you need. You don't need any more than 6 level 6s for this deck. But I think they're all good for their own reasons, and I think it really does depend on your situation as to which ones you'll be playing as and when, really. Next up, level 7s. We only run 1, just Shine Grey Ruin Mode. It's just a good one-off to have. I mean, you could throw in anything in this deck for a level 7. You could, if you really wanted to, you could throw in Omnimon Merciful Mode, a Death X. Literally, you could run anything. But I find this is just a good card in general to have, just because of its when Digivolving effect, which is also a non-deletion effect, which is you'll give your opponent minus 5,000 DP across the board, and that lasts until the end of their next turn. Additionally, it also has an end of attack effect, which is, you swing, you then delete this Digimon, and then you delete one of your opponent's Digimon, and then you recover +1, and you hatch a new egg. So it's quite good if it's still your turn, and you're able to swing, and then you can essentially just restart, which is ideal. And it's on deletion, will obviously give the Digimon again another 5,000. So if they've got anything with 10k or less, it's going to say goodbye. But just a one-off of this is ideal. Next up, we run it into our Tamers. Now, you're all probably guessing as to what I'm playing. I'm joking, you probably already know what I'm playing. But 4 Rikas. It's just a mandatory 4-off. They're the only Tamers you need for this deck. I've seen some decks where they include a couple of extra Tamers. I think it really does rely on what your sort of play strategy will be, but just a 4 of these is fine. Because most of your memory gaining is going to be done when you play option cards anyway, especially with the Renamon inherited effects. But the earlier you get this Tamer in play, the quicker this deck starts to ramp up. And that's just because you can utilize her your turn effect, which is whenever you swing with anything from the Sakuyamon lineup. So, Renamon, Kyubimon, Talmon, and Sakuyamon, you can suspend Rika to play an option card with plugging in its name for no cost. And when you do, all the DP reduction effects pop. And at the same time, you can Digivolve into next level Digimon, or you'll be playing out cards because of other effects that will pop. It all goes off in one swing, and you get to do all of that as well before your opponent can react. So it's incredibly useful. But just a 4 off of her that's all you need. If you run anything less than 4, you're being silly. Lastly, Option cards. First one, just a one-off. We all know it's restricted for a reason, and it's because it's stupid good. Costs you 6, so it's not necessarily a bad card to play for a cost of 6 either. You know, you get to reveal the top 2 cards of your security stack. Top 2 cards of your deck, and you get to place one of them in your hand and place the other one in your security stack. So it's a good recovery card in general. Its delay effect as well lets you gain free memory, which is very, very useful at times. Sadly, you won't be able to utilize this card with any of the, the Sakuyamon made modes or Kazuhamons. But, it's 6 for a reason, isn't it? And that's why it was restricted. So, next up, the main plugin cards that I run is plugin S. This is the reason why you want to be running free, because you get to draw 1 card, then you can Digivolve into a Digimon for a cost of 3 or less, which is pretty much almost everything. So it's just a good card to have. Ideally, you want to be seeing that when you're swinging during early games, or potentially just to Digivolve for 1 cost less if you're going up into your level 5s or higher. So it's just a good free off to have. Security effect as well is actually pretty good. You get to reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, and you get to add 1 Digimon card among them to your hand. The remaining cards go to the bottom of the deck, and then you get to add this back to your hand anyway. So it's good for setting up the pieces as well. Next up, just a one-off of the offense plugin A. This particular card just gives one of your Digimon security attack +1. Its security effect is exactly the same. You reveal the top 3 cards, except in this case you'll add 1 Tamer card instead, bottom deck the rest, and then you'll add this card to hand. But it's good. I mean, don't get me wrong, you can mix and match these ratios as you see fit. It's how you play at the end of the day. I only run a one-off in this particular case because this deck is not aggressive. It's not supposed to be aggressive. It's supposed to be balanced. And I think if you build this to a degree of balance, it can be people underestimate it, which is the main thing, because, they're not sure how to play against it. So it's just, for me, just a one-off. I think there are times where you might want to swing with it, and the reason why you'll use that is because you'll probably end up using this as well, which is high-speed plugin D. This particular card gives one of your Digimon jamming. It can't be blocked as well. So it's just a good, if you have these two and you combine them, you're swinging for anywhere up to 4 checks, depending on what you end up doing with jamming and security attack +1. So the inherited as well is quite good. Security effect, you draw 1 card and then add this to hand. So there's a good amount of recycling with these plug-in cards, especially if you end up throwing them back on top of your security with maid mode and so forth. The next one I run is defense plugin C. It's just a good card. It's a high play cost, and there are times sometimes I'll play it, just hard play it, because I don't really have any other choice. But you give one of your Digimon blocker and reboot, and it can't be deleted by your opponent's effects until the end of their next turn. So it's actually a good defensive card in general. Its security effect is also pretty good. You get to reveal the top 3 cards, and then you can play a Digimon with a cost of 4 or less among them from your, and then you'll bottom deck the rest, and then you'll add this card to hand as well. So it does what black decks do, basically, especially the D Brigade stuff, where they just play cards for no cost at times. But it's just a good one-off in this deck for defensive purposes. However, my new favourite plugin card is this one, Pause Plugin P. It was released with the promotional cards that came out for BT15. In short, you give one of your opponent's Digimon -6,000 DP, and that Digimon there when Digivolving effects don't trigger as well. So it's a really good card. Its security effect, in this particular case, it literally gives one of your opponent's Digimon -6,000 DP, and then you add it to your hand. and so it's just a good defensive card as well, especially if you'll see in my last video when I used this deck against Leopardmon, by giving a Lilymon Ace minus 6,000, it prevented my opponent from then swinging with it to cause me further concern because of that risk of losing the overflow. But at times you're going to be using minus 6,000 DP on a lot of level 4, or in some cases level 5 Digimon that have that DP or less. So this card was just the MVP for me in my last tournament. It came up so often that even just running 2 of them, in an ideal world, I would probably take out these 2 to run a complete 4 set just of that, because the DP reduction is just stupid funny, and it's incredibly handy. However, ratios I have right now are working for me, so I probably won't change this unless I really feel the need to. But there are so many other option cards with plugging in its name that you can use in this deck. The ones that can, provide additional DP boost, or, depending on your playstyle, will depend on how you sort of mix and match your ratios. But I would imagine a lot of people will use this more so than everything else because of the advantage to Digivolve for no cost with certain combos. But these are what I play. Feel free to mix and match at your own accord, just to suit your playstyles. But sadly, I don't see Sakuyamon getting much more support over the next couple of sets, and I think this is as strong as it probably will be for a little while. I know there's the new Sakuyamon Maid Mode Ace coming out. I'm not sure when off the top of my head, but it's an ace card, so it can be a little bit, it'll either end up being a one-off or potentially a full set depending on how good the card is. The next couple of videos you might see from me are going to be in relation to updated decks from BT15. I've got a few cards on the way in regards to a certain avian variety. I love playing this deck, but Phoenixmon, I'll have an updated version of that coming out in the next couple of weeks when the cards all turn up. And once I've done a little bit of deck testing as well, I just want to make sure that it's somewhat, it works. I'm pretty sure it does already, but I prefer to play test physically just to get a vibe for it really, instead of doing the whole online stuff. And then the second deck profile I'll be releasing in March will also be an updated take on Aegistramon, which I've already posted only a few days ago, weirdly. I was going to hold off until BT15 came out, but I figured I'd just give you all a taste as to what I was playing. A few changes have been made, but you'll see that later on. At the end of this video, you'll see a picture of the deck lineup for the Sakuyamon stuff I've just shown you. Feel free to like the video, support the channel by subscribing, you know the deal. And then obviously you can comment on the video. Please feel free to give me some feedback if you think the Sakuyamon does need any changes, or how you best play it really. I know it's a popular deck that people often take down locals, so I'd love to see what your take on the deck is, whether you throw any juicy spiciness in there. But thank you very much as always for watching the videos. It is truly appreciated. But thank you again and take care.